Part of my experience, I was the commander of the narcotic enforcement effort for the Los Angeles Police Department when President Nixon announced the war on drugs 40 years ago. I gave it everything I could give it to successfully implement the policies of this country with regard to drug enforcement and the war on drugs. And it wasn't long before I learned that what I was doing was a wheel spinner. We were doing more harm through the war on drugs than drugs were bringing harm to our communities. And so I came to view this drug war as a total and complete failure, and I have become an advocate to change the policy of our drug laws in this country. Since Nixon announced, we've arrested 43 million people in this country. And what that means for drug violations. And that 43 million, by the way, are all over the age of 18. That doesn't count the children that we get in the schools like was gotten in this school. And we have horribly damaged those people, those 43 million people. Half of those drug arrests were for simple possession of marijuana. We labeled those people as drug offenders. We put a scarlet letter on their chest. We denied them the ability to get a job. We denied them the ability to get housing. We denied them the ability to get an education, a Pell Grant. We relegated those 43 million people to a subclass within our society. And we are continuing to do it. We've unraveled our communities with this drug war like you can't believe. It was interesting for me to hear today that most of the children arrested in this drug sting were not only special education kids, but were also minorities, because I thought, gee, here's one of the first places I'm going to come where I'm going to see a lot of white people getting arrested for drug offenses. And again, that's not the case, because the war on drugs is actually a war on the people of this country, and the greatest casualties are minorities in this country, completely out of proportion to drug use. Drug use among people is pretty equivalent in terms of white and black and Hispanic, but it's the black and the Hispanic portion of our population that we're stacking into our jails. This situation, to me, is with this war on drugs and the growth of the war on drugs and the harms that it's brought to our communities, we have handed our federal government, and through our federal government, through grants, through militarization of equipment, through asset seizure, profit sharing, through providing slush funds from the federal government strictly to police departments and district attorneys, we have turned this drug war into policing for profit. They build their armories in my little town of Long Beach. I was shocked to see the chief of police marching down 2nd Street at Christmas in the Christmas parade, leading his armored vehicle. A peace officer, not a military soldier, a peace officer with no enemies, with everyone we run across as peace officers in our communities. They are people, whether they're a bank robber or whatever, they are people who are entitled to the protections of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Soldiers are trained to kill. Police officers are supposed to be peace officers. But this is what's happened with this war on drugs. We have created a military occupation of our communities through our police departments. We have lost our sense of public safety. The drug war is anti-public safety. This operation in this school is so egregious to me. That's why I traveled 100 miles to get here today. I see that the power base in this community, this missing table over here, were challenged by parents who had a right to enter their child into special education, and this district did not accommodate that right. So they appealed, like we can do in a democracy. And the school district lost that appeal. And so that child was given the opportunity to go into a special education class. But what happens when he gets into that special education class? What happens? The first thing, the teacher is calling the parents and saying, is your son on drugs? Yes, he is. 3 prescriptions. We control them. And they're for all of these reasons. Oh. The next thing that happens is that the sheriff comes into the classroom with a drug-sniffing dog. Who's targeted? One backpack, their child. Now I'm smelling retaliation already. It's all over this thing because they won that first time. The child is taken from the classroom with his backpack, with this dog that's trained to find dope. What's in the backpack? The teacher thought it would be drugs because she called a few days before and asked about it. It's a cough drop that this dog alerted to. A lot of people don't know that these dogs that alert, it's really not the dog alerting, it's the police officer making the dog alert so that the dog can give the police officer the probable cause to make the search. I think this revealed a bad dog and a bad search, and I think it revealed more to this search than a random visit in the classroom. So after the cough drop incident, what happens? There's an undercover sting operation, and this child is targeted. And in the literature I read, the principal of the school, superintendent of the school, the people that were involved in the review of their original appeal knew that that child was targeted. The police officers were apparently briefed by the school people when they knew they were targeted. And if they gave him the proper briefing, they told him all about the kid because the parents have evidence that they showed the police the kid's package. What's in the kid's package? What's in the kid's package for a police officer to listen to, for a school principal to listen to, for a supervising police officer, for a sheriff to listen to decide to target a student in that school? Here's what they told him. Student's been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, anxiety disorder, impulse control disorder, intermittent explosive disorder, Asperger's disorder, and Tourette's syndrome. District's also aware student took medication daily for bipolar disorder, anxiety, and mood stabilization. Yet, with all of that information, they targeted this child. With all that kind of information, they targeted other children in this school. It's tyrannical. The only solution to this is to end the war on drugs. The only solution to this is to find a different policy. Drugs are on this campus. They have been for 40 years. But we haven't treated them like we should. We have given the regulation, control, and taxation of those drugs. We've handed that over to the cartels and the street gangs. We have not taken charge as a government. I ask you, when is the last time anybody in this room has ever heard of a kid scoring a bottle of Jim Beam on a school ground? They don't, because Jim Beam whiskey is regulated and controlled. When is the last time anyone in this room has heard about Coors and Budweiser shooting it out on the street for territory? You don't, because it's regulated and controlled. But the dope that is pushed at this school, when the kid gets out on the school ground, is unable to score a marijuana cigarette, it's likely going to be laced with a lot of impurities, and many times there's going to be heroin in it, there's going to be cocaine in it, there's going to be PCP in it, because we're not regulating and control what the drug pushers push. But the liquor store, you read a label, you know what you're getting. And that's what we need to do in this country. We need to end this war on drugs. We need to end this war on the people, and we need to regulate and control the drugs. I have another list. I've been building this list for a long time, and I've added to it today. We need to end prohibition of drugs with a tight system of government regulation and control that will effectively cripple the violent cartels and street dealers who control the illegal marketplace, and put in place a system that treats drug abuse as a public health and education issue. There is no other public health and education issue in this country in which we use the criminal justice system to solve the problems. If such a system were in place, the cartel-supported gangbanger pushers would be denied a product to push. There would be fewer guns on the streets, less attraction to gang membership, and a regulated marketplace that requires labeling and identification to purchase a product intended for adult consumption and replace the illegal market. Under this kind of system, our communities would heal, the mass incarceration of people of color would shrink, more fathers would be around for their kids, fewer children would be sent to foster homes, education would replace arrest, treatment would supplant jail and the brand of felon, the arms race between the police, gangs, and cartels would abate, and profiling by our police officers would be replaced by probable cause based upon reasonable suspicion. And I add to the list today, special needs children would not be untargeted by undercover narcotic officers within our schools. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Diane Goldstein. I'm a retired lieutenant from Redondo Beach Police Department, and Steve Downing and I both speak for law enforcement against prohibition. I'm here not to talk about the macro view of why the drug war has failed. Steve and others will cover that much more eloquently than I will. But I'm here to speak about my personal experience as a school resource officer at Redondo Union High School back in the 1990s. I started our first school resource officer program, and unfortunately it was started during the time of 1994 when Congress passed the Gun-Free School Act through No Child Left Behind federal legislation. And what that law effectively established was the zero tolerance policies in our school districts across our nation. And in spite of that, because of the way that we ran our school resource officer program, I was considered an administrator on campus, and because of that capability, I was able to craft solutions for special needs kids because I sat on IEPs. I brought in, if we had special needs kids that were on probation or CYA parole, everybody became part of the solution to try to make our children successful first and foremost. Expulsion was the last resort. And what we've seen since the early 1990s, and because of the war on drugs, is we have this viewpoint that this ideological goal of establishing a drug-free America or a drug-free school. And we have to let go of that ideological goal because we're never going to achieve it. We have to remember that our schools are just microcosms of our communities. The need for an undercover operation on a school campus is indicative of the failure of the war on drugs. I can't give you a much better indicator of how our national drug policy has failed our children by having to have this undercover operation. In 1994, when I was the school resource officer, our agency with our school district decided to do an undercover operation where we brought Los Angeles sheriffs into our school. I was not notified until the day that they arrested people. And what we chose to do is, instead of embarrassing the kids and pulling them out in handcuffs from their classrooms, is because I was part of the campus, is I went and pulled people out and walked them to an office where they were, in fact, then told what was going to happen. We called each and every one of the parents, even if the parents were over the age of 18, because the school district is acting in local parentage. They have an obligation to give out that information. And so, in reading all the press reports, is I understand the singular focus of law enforcement. Some of the quotes was that this undercover operation was an efficient way to curb drug dealing in schools, and that it was to quell the hand-to-hand sales, and that this deterrent effect can last for up to a couple years. I would disagree with all of it. In fact, what we've seen is that undercover operations that were initiated by LAPD and done for a significant number of years were stopped by the Los Angeles School District because what they saw is that they were targeting primarily special education kids and kids who were minorities. LAPD said this isn't working, the school district said this isn't working. And so what we know is law enforcement will use sometimes the most, what they believe is an efficient way of handling a problem, but we're just handling the problem short term. And like Redondo Union High School District did with our special needs program and with the collaboration of law enforcement, things that we did is we implemented restorative justice on our campus. We implemented social skills curriculum. We implemented peer mediation. We implemented behavior intervention, mentoring, and getting ahead of the game because we knew who our children were, who were at risk, and who were prone to using drugs. And that way, we minimize the damage of the criminal justice system that happens when we have a single solution to a problem that we can never solve in America.